In the middle of life's noise, the meetings, the timelines, the roles we perform, there is something faint, something warm, that returns like a hush of spring sunlight falling softly on a forgotten part of us. It does not speak loudly. It does not ask for recognition. It simply rises. A gentle smile, not worn on the face, but felt in the soul. This smile belongs to the child within, not the memory of a child, but the living presence of one. She has always been there, waiting, not for perfection, but for presence. Many women, despite having arrived at everything they once reached for, titles, applause, admiration, still whisper in secret, "Why don't I feel whole?" And the answer doesn't live in more achievements. It lives in the untouched part of the self that has been silenced in the name of growing up. Carl Jung didn't see the inner child as a sentimental memory. He called it an archetype, an essential structure of the psyche, as real and foundational as the heart is to the body. You don't grow out of this child. You grow by listening to her. He once wrote that the archetype is a psychic organ, and like any organ, it can become wounded if misunderstood or ignored. This inner child isn't the ego in disguise. She is the original pulse of intuition, joy, imagination, and raw emotion. She is the wild seed before the world began pruning. And though we build our lives around strength and strategy, it is often the neglected child within who holds the key to our aliveness. Every fairy tale begins with a child. Every myth returns to a seed of innocence. In Jung's view, this is no coincidence. The child archetype symbolizes potential, what is yet to be realized but already lives inside us. When a woman paints again after years, not for profit, but for the joy of it, when she dances barefoot without needing rhythm, when she sings a tune she once loved at age 7, the child smiles, not out of nostalgia, but because she has been seen again. The moment you feel lifted by a sudden memory, a tune, a scent, a glimpse of sunlight through trees, and something inside loosens, that is her. That is your inner child calling you back. Not to regress, but to remember. And when she is ignored too long, you begin to feel dry inside. You accomplish but feel hollow. You perform but forget joy. You wake up tired, not just in body, but in soul. One artist once shared how she stopped painting altogether. She had turned her gift into a career, and somewhere along the way, the colors dimmed. But one day, she opened an old box of crayons and drew a simple, smiling face. In that moment, she said, something broke open, not in her hand, but in her chest. She felt her heart again, the same heart she had when she first fell in love with art. That moment wasn't trivial. It was sacred, because the child had been touched. The child archetype isn't created by our past. It is deeper than memory. It is inherited from the collective soul of humanity, passed through myths, symbols, and stories that live inside us all. This is why tales like Snow White or images of the Madonna and child stir something ancient in us. They speak to the universal child, not yours or mine, but ours, the part of us that remembers before we forgot. Jung warned that if the unconscious remains unconscious, it will direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. The child, when ignored, becomes the ghost in the system, steering our reactions, shaping our fears, choking our self-trust. But when we ask, even silently, what do you need? And we listen, truly listen, we change that fate. We begin to build a bridge between who we were told to be and who we actually are. To hold the inner child is to awaken a form of confidence that does not compete, does not pose, does not need permission. It's not learned, it's remembered, because that child always believed before she was doubted, before she was molded, before she was told to be quiet. Feminine confidence begins not when we perform worthiness, but when we come home to the part of us that never doubted it. So, If you've ever felt that quiet ache in your chest for no clear reason, or caught yourself laughing too hard at a childhood memory and then quickly wiping it away, pause. You are not broken. You are remembering. The smile rising in your soul is not from today. It's from the eternal child within who just wants you to stop, to notice, and to say, I see you. I'm listening now. And when that happens, when she smiles back, no crown, no applause, no perfection will ever compare. Once you recognize her, that silent girl who lives beneath the surface of your polished strength, something inside begins to shift. And slowly, without drama, without announcement, your relationship with confidence changes. It stops being something to chase. It starts becoming something that grows from within. Jung taught that when we bring the unconscious into the light, it no longer controls us from the shadows. And the child archetype, once buried, becomes a guiding flame the moment we allow her to speak. True feminine confidence is not born from titles, applause, or the approval of others. It blooms from the soil of self-trust. And self-trust only grows where there is emotional safety, not the kind granted by others, but the kind we give ourselves when we stop silencing the inner voice. The child within doesn't ask for mastery. She asks for permission to feel, to be afraid without shame, to be joyful without restraint, to be present without performance. Many women carry the weight of appearing confident, standing tall, speaking clearly, pushing forward, all while carrying a silent ache. That ache is often the echo of a little girl who never got to cry, or rest, or be messy, or be held. Jung once said the child archetype demands unceasing care, for it is always in the process of becoming. And that process is sacred. It is not weakness. It is rebirth. Imagine your own moments of tension, the hesitation before speaking, the shaking voice when making a request, the urge to over-explain or shrink back. These are not random habits. They are messages. They are signs that the child inside is still waiting for reassurance, not from the world, but from you. And the moment you say, I hear you, you're allowed to be here, you begin to reclaim a strength that doesn't depend on being right, or being liked, or being perfect. There is a quiet ritual that many women have tried, writing letters to their younger selves, not for nostalgia, but for healing. One woman wrote to her 8-year-old self, who felt unloved in school. She told her, "You didn't do anything wrong. You deserved kindness." And she said that after writing those words, her shoulders dropped for the first time in years. Not because the past changed, but because her relationship with it did. The child was no longer left alone in that memory. She had been found. Confidence begins in those moments. Not the public ones, but the private, tender ones. The ones where you cry without apology. The ones where you play without judgment. The ones where you forgive yourself, not because you earned it, but because you are human and worthy of compassion. Jung said, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And often, that darkness is not monstrous. It is simply the forgotten feelings of a child. When that child is honored, we stop leaking power. We stop explaining ourselves. We stop performing worth. And in its place, something magnetic begins to form. The kind of confidence that does not shout. It simply is. A voice that does not tremble because it is not trying to prove anything. A presence that radiates safety because it is anchored in truth. You can test this for yourself. Take just 5 minutes today. Sit quietly and ask, what does my inner child need right now? It might surprise you. It might be a nap, or a walk, or to paint without purpose, to eat with your fingers, to cancel a meeting, to cry, or to laugh with your whole body. And if you allow it just once, something will rise in you that no self-help book can teach, the feeling of being fully alive. Many women say they feel more confident after speaking to their inner child daily, not because they have changed their image, but Because they have dropped the mask. One executive said public speaking used to terrify her, but after forgiving her younger self for years of silence and fear, she felt a calm strength wash over her. She no longer needed to impress. She only needed to speak. And the audience felt it. Her voice wasn't louder. It was truer. This is the integration process Jung wrote about. Not adding layers to become more, but bringing home what was lost so you can become whole. When you do that, you don't become someone new. You become who you've always been underneath the adaptation. You begin to trust your instincts, not because they're always right, but because they are always real. And reality is the root of confidence. So, ask yourself, gently, when was the last time you let yourself cry? Without explanation. When was the last time you played without needing it to be productive? These are not luxuries. These are soul practices, and every time you say yes to them, you say yes to her, the girl who has always waited for your return. The child does not need you to be perfect. She needs you to be with her, to witness her, to choose her. And in choosing her, you choose the part of yourself that never stopped believing. In wonder, in beauty, in magic, in love. And from that soil, feminine confidence blooms like a wildflower. Untrained, untrimmed, let your inner child speak. Not in whispers, but in action. Let her decide your joy, even if it looks strange. Let her rest when she's tired, even if no one else understands. Let her giggle when she's happy, even if it's inconvenient. And you'll begin to feel it, a quiet power rising from a place so deep, so steady, it can never be taken away. You are not here to impress. You are here to return to the original woman, whole and holy, whose strength was never in her control, but in her capacity to feel and trust and belong to herself. And that begins with one small whisper to your inner child. I'm still here, and I'm not leaving. We often imagine wounds as dramatic, visible things, sharp, sudden, unforgettable. But the deepest wounds a soul carries are the ones caused by silence. Not just the silence of others, but the silence we keep with ourselves. And at the center of that silence, often trapped in a forgotten corner of the psyche, sits the inner child, waiting, watching, whispering, until she grows too quiet to hear. Carl Jung warned us that whatever we do not face within will show up as life. That is the quiet tragedy of neglecting the inner child. Not only does she go unheard, but her voice begins to echo through our choices, our fears, our fatigue. You may feel it without knowing its name. The hesitation before saying no. The anxiety that rises in seemingly harmless moments. The smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. These are not surface issues. They are signals. The child within has been silenced too long. When the inner child is neglected, the body remembers. Confidence becomes performance. Boundaries become blurred. Joy becomes a rare visitor. And still, the world may not notice, because you're functioning, producing, succeeding. But underneath, something sacred begins to dry up. Your vitality thins. Your laughter fades. Your presence feels borrowed, like you're wearing yourself instead of living yourself. Many women carry a quiet exhaustion they cannot name. They wonder why they feel so tired after a simple interaction, why they second-guess every word in a conversation, why a compliment stings as much as a criticism. These are not random sensitivities. They are the marks of a child who learned to survive by shrinking, by pleasing, by disappearing. And unless she is found, those patterns remain, disguised as personality. Jung called this the power of the shadow, the parts of us we disown, the emotions we bury, the pain we cannot admit. And when the child becomes part of the shadow, we begin to fracture. You might feel strong in the boardroom, but suddenly crumble in your relationships. You might be kind to everyone, but never to yourself. You might crave softness, but feel guilty for needing rest. These are symptoms of exile, the exile of your original self. We wear personas like armor. Jung described the persona as the mask we create to survive the world, to fulfill roles, to be accepted. But the cost of that mask is often the abandonment of the inner world. The more we adapt to expectations, the farther we drift from authenticity. And somewhere along the way, the child's voice goes quiet. Not because she's gone, but because she's tired of not being heard. Have you ever felt your voice tremble when you tried to speak up? Or watched yourself say yes when every part of you wanted to say no? Have you walked away from a conversation replaying every word you spoke, wondering if you were too much or not enough? These are not character flaws. They are signs of a severed connection between the adult and the child within. And the body carries this disconnection. Shoulders curl inward. Posture tightens. Eyes avoid contact. You may call it anxiety or shyness, but often it's the child protecting herself, the only way she knows how: by hiding. She learned early that love was conditional, that tears made others uncomfortable, that speaking her truth came with consequences. So she adapted, and in doing so she disappeared. But disappearing has a cost. Over time, the soul begins to ache for itself. You may begin to feel numb, not sad, not angry, just blank, as if you're watching your life rather than living it. That numbness is grief unexpressed, joy unclaimed, power unlived. And the longer it stays, the heavier it becomes. You are not broken for feeling this. You are not weak. You are human, and your child self is still waiting to be seen. Not fixed, not improved, just seen, just heard, just held in the presence of your adult self, not with judgment, but with care. That is what begins to restore the fracture. That is what begins to reawaken your truth. Jung said, "It is under all circumstances an advantage to be in full possession of one's personality, and that includes the pieces we were once told to hide, the softness, the fear, the longing, the magic. When we bring those parts home, we don't become immature, we become whole, and wholeness is what confidence is built upon." So ask yourself, when was the last time you said, "I feel hurt," without explaining it away? When did you last say no without guilt? When did you last dance or cry or speak your truth, not to impress, but just because it was real? These are the signs. These are the keys. And if it's been too long, then it's time to return. The child within you does not need you to be perfect. She needs you to show up, to stop apologizing for her feelings, to stop dismissing her voice. She is not your weakness. She is your root. And when you return to her, your confidence won't just come back. It will deepen, because now it will be rooted in truth. The kind of truth that doesn't crack under pressure. The kind of truth that doesn't shrink for comfort. The kind of truth that radiates from the inside out. All because you finally stopped running and turned around to say, "I hear you. I'm ready." Healing doesn't always begin with a breakthrough. Sometimes it begins with a whisper. And the most profound transformations often begin not in the spotlight, but in silence, in the quiet space between your breath and your heart, where the inner child still waits. Carl Jung believed the way to wholeness was not through perfection, but through integration. To make the unconscious conscious is not an event, but a slow awakening. And it starts with turning inward, not outward. If the inner child has been ignored, the first step is not to fix her, but to find her. And that begins with imagination. Not the kind used for fantasy or escape, but for reconnection. Sit quietly, breathe, and gently ask yourself, if I could see her, what would she look like? Maybe she's 5 or 7. Maybe she has wild hair or shy eyes. Maybe she's sitting in a corner or skipping barefoot in a field. However she appears, let her be there, without judgment. Jung called this process active imagination, a dialogue between the conscious and unconscious. It is not a trick. It is a sacred meeting. And when you find her, don't rush. Don't ask her to perform. Simply be with her. Ask, what do you need? The answer might not come in words. It might come as a feeling, a memory, a tear. Whatever rises, welcome it, like a guest you've been waiting years to see. You may find she wants something simple, to rest, to play, to be held. One woman shared that when she visualized her inner child, the child said nothing, just curled into a ball. And that silence said everything. It said, "I've waited a long time." In that moment, she didn't speak. She just imagined wrapping her arms around that small girl. And that, she later said, changed her more than any advice ever had. The next step is to write. Not a journal entry, a letter. Address it directly to your younger self. Let the words be raw, even messy. You might begin with, "I'm sorry I left you alone when you needed me." Or, "I didn't know how to protect you back then, but I do now." Or simply, "I miss you. I see you. I love you." This is not an exercise in nostalgia. It is the beginning of emotional repair. The words you never received as a child become the medicine you offer yourself now. Many women find that tears begin to fall midway through this letter. Not tears of despair, but of return. One woman wrote, "Dear little me, I know you wanted to be hugged at school when they laughed at you. I'm here now." She said she cried for the first time in months, not because she was falling apart, but because something long buried was finally being seen. That's not weakness. That's resurrection. After writing, read the letter aloud. Not for performance, but for embodiment. Let the sound of your own voice carry those words into your body. Let the child hear them. Jung believed deeply that healing was not intellectual. It had to become felt, and when the body hears compassion, it softens. The muscles unclench. The breath deepens. The inner ground becomes safe again. Now let this practice move beyond the mind and into your life. Take one day, even 1 hour, to let your inner child lead. What did she love? Doodling? Spinning in circles? Watching the clouds? Let her do it, not for results. For presence. One woman I knew returned to hula hooping at age 4, not because it made sense, but because it made her feel. And in that joy, she rediscovered a part of herself she thought was gone. Play is sacred. It is not frivolous. It is a doorway to the soul. Jung once wrote, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity." When you draw just for fun, sing just because, dance without rhythm, you are not wasting time. You are remembering how to live. You might also choose a physical object to symbolize this return. A stone, a ribbon, a photo, a song. Let it be a reminder. Every time you see it or touch it, pause and ask, "How is she today?" This habit begins to rewire your attention, shifting it from constant self-correction to consistent self-connection. And finally, speak to her each morning. Before the world asks anything of you, give yourself 2 minutes to ask her, "What do you need today?" Some days, she might say rest. Other days, she might ask for bravery. But no matter what she says, you'll start to notice something miraculous. The more you listen, the more she trusts you. And the more she trusts you, the more confidence you feel. This is not the confidence of performance, but of wholeness. It is rooted, gentle, and unshakable, because it comes from a soul that is no longer fractured, no longer exiled. It is the kind of power that glows quietly, the kind that inspires without trying, the kind that says, "I am not perfect, but I am fully here," and that is enough. So begin. Find her. Write to her. Let her play. Let her cry. Let her rest. And most of all, let her know you are not alone anymore. I'm here. I've come back for you. And when she smiles again, not just in memory, but in your breath, your posture, your laughter, you will know this is the beginning of everything. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when tending to the inner child no longer feels like a healing ritual, but a way of life. It's not something you do in crisis anymore. It becomes who you are. The gentle return becomes a rhythm. The smile no longer flickers, it remains. And it is in this moment that the deeper journey begins. The one Jung called individuation. Individuation is not the path to improvement. It is the path to wholeness. It does not ask, how can I become better? It asks, how can I become more myself? It is the slow, soul-deep process of weaving together all the fragments. The strong woman, the frightened child, the visionary, the doubter, the lover, the wounded one. None are left behind. All are integrated. All are welcomed home. Jung taught that the goal of individuation is to become an individual, not in the sense of separation from others, but in the sense of reunion with the true self. It means stepping beyond the persona, the mask we wear, for approval, and turning inward to meet the soul, the self, in all its contradictions. It is a holy reconciliation, a coming together of what we feared made us too much or not enough. Have you ever felt that you live as two people? One who shows up confidently in public, articulate, capable, composed, and another who weeps silently at night, feeling unsure, unseen, unprotected. This is not hypocrisy. It is the separation that comes from a child who was never integrated into the adult. Individuation is the process by which those two selves stop competing and begin to coexist. When you begin to truly listen to the child, you notice her everywhere. Not just in memories, but in your instincts. In the moment you say no without guilt. In the moment you laugh loudly in public. In the moment you choose rest over performance. These are not acts of indulgence. These are acts of unification. Moments when the soul stops fragmenting and begins to stand fully present. Jung once wrote that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off parts of the self, but by embracing the opposites. That means we do not silence fear to become brave. We carry it. We do not erase the past to claim the future. We integrate it. The child within, the most innocent, wounded, intuitive part of us, is not a phase to grow out of. She is the root of everything alive in us. There is a woman I knew, a speaker, known for her grace and insight. She moved rooms with her words, inspired audiences with ease. But she confessed that every time she left the stage, she felt hollow, applauded, but not whole, until in a session with herself. She wrote to her 6-year-old self, the girl who had once been told her voice was too loud, her questions too much. After that, everything changed. She no longer performed strength. She became a space for truth. This is what individuation gives us. A center, a place inside from which everything flows. When the inner child is embraced, when the past is not erased, but honored, you stop needing external proof. Confidence stops being situational. It becomes structural, a new architecture within. You carry yourself differently, not because you've learned a trick, but because you've returned to your original design. You can feel it in your body. Your walk slows, becomes steady. Your voice deepens, becomes honest. Your gaze softens, becomes unwavering. You don't need to defend your boundaries. They hold naturally. You don't need to justify your joy. It's self-evident. You become someone who no longer needs to be understood to feel safe. And this energy is contagious. A woman in the process of individuation becomes a mirror, not of perfection, but of permission. Others feel safer in her presence. They breathe more freely. They drop their own masks. Because your wholeness gives them permission to believe theirs is possible too. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And this becoming is not an ascent. It is a descent into memory, into pain, into joy, into origin. It is not a ladder. It is a spiral. Each return to the child brings new clarity, new softness, new strength, and each step forward is anchored more deeply in what is real. Individuation doesn't mean the wounds disappear. It means they stop defining you. You no longer act out of abandonment. You respond from presence. You no longer chase love. You offer it freely. You no longer mask your fear. You speak from it and through it with honesty. And that honesty is what people trust because it is rare and it is real. So ask yourself today, what part of me have I left behind? What voice within me have I dismissed? What feeling have I silenced in the name of survival? Go back, not to relive, but to reclaim. She is still there, and she does not need you to become anything new. She needs you to return. That is the beginning of integration. That is the root of peace. And as the child rises to meet you, hand in hand with the woman you are today, you will begin to feel what no title, no trophy, no praise has ever given you. Wholeness. And from that place, everything changes. Not because the world bends to you, but because you are no longer bent to fit the world. You are home. Finally, fully. And that is where your power begins. Individuation isn't always marked by a grand awakening. More often, it begins in the ordinary, a moment that no one else notices, but the soul never forgets. For Camila, a 37-year-old executive, that moment came not with thunder, but with a whisper. Her life, on paper, was pristine, Ivy League education, promotions, prestige. She carried herself like the embodiment of competence. And yet behind her eyes, something was missing. Something essential, something unnamed. Carl Jung wrote that the more civilized we become, the more subtly we repress the natural self. And Camila was, in many ways, a textbook example. She had mastered the art of performance, not for vanity, but for survival. Her voice was calm. Her answers were sharp, but her body told a different story. Clenched jaw, shallow breath, constant fatigue. Every night, she returned to a beautiful apartment filled with success, but void of warmth. Until one evening, something shifted. She had received a book as a gift. Jung's The Undiscovered Self. It sat on her shelf for weeks. But that night, in the quiet hum of loneliness, she opened it. One line stopped her cold. What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. She closed the book, stared at the wall, and whispered to herself, "What have I been resisting?" The answer came swiftly, not as thought, but as a memory. The little girl who used to sing in front of mirrors, until the world told her to hush. The days that followed became a quiet unraveling. Camila began journaling, not for productivity, but for honesty. The entries began short. "I'm tired. I feel invisible." But within a week, something cracked open. She remembered being 5, standing at a window, waiting for her father. He never came. She remembered being 10, holding back tears in school. She remembered being 15, told by a teacher to stop being too emotional. And she realized she had never truly been allowed to feel. From that point, she began to create space for the child within. Each morning, before her meetings, she closed her eyes and imagined the 6-year-old version of herself, sitting on a swing. "What do you need today?" she would ask. Sometimes the answer was rest. Sometimes it was permission to mess up. Sometimes it was just to be hugged. So she began to do the unthinkable. She held herself, literally wrapped her own arms around her shoulders. It felt silly at first, then it felt sacred. As the days passed, the changes were subtle, but real. Her voice, once sharp and polished, softened into something deeper, warmer. She spoke with more pauses, not from hesitation, but from presence. In meetings, she no longer rushed to prove herself. She listened, she breathed, and slowly, others began to shift too. One junior colleague said, "Since you changed, it feels like I can finally breathe at work." Camilla cried that night, not from sorrow, but from recognition. She was finally being, not just doing. The more she integrated the child within, the less effort it took to be authentic. She no longer needed to curate strength. It rose on its own. She stopped dreading her reflection. She stopped shrinking in relationships. She even began singing again, softly, in the shower, in the car, and every note felt like a thread sewing her back together. The child who once sang had not died. She had been waiting. This is the invisible power of individuation. It doesn't make you someone else. It reveals the someone who's been buried beneath expectations and adaptation. Camila didn't become less professional. She became more present. She didn't lose ambition. She found alignment. Her power stopped coming from control and started flowing from connection to herself, to her past, to her purpose. Jung wrote, "The reason for evil in the world is that people are not able to tell their stories." And in embracing her story, Camila began to create space for others. Not by preaching, but simply by being. Her presence softened rooms. Her honesty gave permission. She no longer needed to impress. She simply needed to show up. And that, it turned out, was what made her magnetic. Have you ever felt like you were succeeding on the outside but shrinking inside? Have you ever felt like your soul was whispering through the cracks, begging you to come home? Camila's story is not unique. It is universal. Behind every composed adult is a child still longing to be seen. And when we see her, really see her, we don't regress. We rise. So if you're carrying that quiet ache, know this: you don't need to collapse to begin healing. All you need is a pause, a breath, a question. What part of me have I forgotten? Ask it. Wait for the answer. And when it comes, in a memory, a tear, a dream, don't turn away. That is your beginning. That is your return. Camila didn't need a new job, a new partner, or a new plan. She needed to remember, to return to the self she once was. Not to stay there, but to bring her forward into the life she was meant to live. And the moment she did, everything changed. Not because the world changed, but because she did. And you can too. Camila's story is not about becoming extraordinary. It is about becoming real. And in that realness, a quiet power began to rise. Not the kind that seeks to dominate, but the kind that anchors and nourishes everyone around it. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And yet, this is the very courage that sets a woman free. When a woman stops running from her past and begins walking beside it, she stops needing approval. Her confidence no longer depends on applause. Her worth is no longer negotiated by how much she gives or performs. It is rooted in the undeniable knowing, "I have come home to myself." And when that happens, she becomes unshakable, not because she is flawless, but because she is whole. You may feel that something similar is awakening in you. A soft pull, a quiet ache, a longing you can't name. That is not weakness. That is your soul calling you back. It's the voice of the inner child saying, "Don't forget me. I still live here." And if you stop, even for a moment, and listen, she will rise to meet you. You don't need a dramatic moment to begin. Sometimes it's the smallest acts that unlock the deepest doors. Holding a childhood photo, writing a letter, dancing without rhythm, crying without shame. These acts aren't indulgences, they are sacred. They are the rituals by which you remember who you are beneath the world's projections. Camila's transformation didn't come from studying Jung. It came from living his wisdom, from letting the inner dialogue unfold, from walking with her inner girl instead of trying to silence her. And as she did, her entire sense of self rearranged. Not destructively, but gently, like bones finding their rightful place again after being misaligned for years. The remarkable thing is that the world responded. Her relationships deepened. Her voice became more compelling. Her presence more healing. Not because she added something to herself, but because she removed what was never hers to carry. The pressure, the masks, the self-betrayal. When she chose to live in alignment with her full self, life began meeting her there. You might wonder, is that possible for me? Could I really stop chasing perfection and still be powerful? Could I soften and still be respected? Could I be seen fully and still be safe? The answer is yes. Not because the world changes, but because you do. When you claim your wholeness, you stop negotiating your truth. This is the sacred paradox Jung revealed. The more you embrace your vulnerability, the more powerful you become. Because you are no longer split. You are no longer hiding. And there is nothing more magnetic than a woman who is not performing her worth, but living from it. So if you feel the ache of disconnection, the fatigue of trying to hold it all together, pause. Close your eyes. Go to her, that little version of you. Ask her, what have I forgotten? What did you once love that I abandoned? And then listen. Don't fix, just listen. And in that quiet, you will begin to remember. You will remember the you who once danced in the kitchen without music. The you who loved stars, or stories, or spinning until dizzy. The you who trusted herself without question, who cried without shame, who dreamed wildly. She is not gone. She is waiting, and every time you honor her, she brings your real power back. This is not the kind of power that demands. It's the kind that is. The kind that makes others feel safe in your presence. The kind that doesn't flinch in the face of emotion. The kind that doesn't have to be loud to be respected. Because it is rooted in the most ancient truth of all. I am enough. Camila's life didn't become easier. It became truer. And in that truth, she discovered joy again. Not the joy of entertainment, but the joy of embodiment. The peace of waking up and knowing she was no longer at war with herself. Her smile became more than polite. Her yeses became more sincere, her boundaries more graceful, and her silence more powerful than words. This is your birthright too. Not to become someone else, but to return, to live as the full expression of everything you already are. Child and woman, soft and strong, wise and wild. The soul doesn't want a perfect version of you. It wants all of you. And when you offer that, when you show up, incomplete, but present, tender, but open, you don't just change your life. You change the energy of every room you enter. Because now you radiate from a place deeper than confidence. You radiate from your soul. There is a moment when the journey home becomes complete. Not because there is nothing left to feel, but because you are no longer afraid to feel it. When the tears no longer surprise you. When the laughter no longer needs permission. When silence no longer feels empty, but sacred. This is the moment the child within, once abandoned, once silenced, now walks beside you, hand in hand, as guide, not ghost. Carl Jung never promised ease. He did not offer formulas. What he offered was this, a path back to soul. And on that path, the one figure who always reappears, in dreams, in myths, in moments of softness, is the child. The one who never stopped believing, even when the adult lost her way. The one who still remembers the truth. If you've come this far, you've likely felt it. A stirring, a soft ache, a flicker of memory that doesn't let go. Maybe it's a smell, a song, a season. Maybe it's the way your heart still leaps at little joys, or how you cry when you see a child being comforted. That is not weakness, that is recognition. The child within you is still alive, and she has been waiting for you to come back. She doesn't need you to rebuild the past. She needs you to include her in your present, to speak from your truth, not someone else's script, to move not for applause but for aliveness, to wake up in the morning and ask, how do I want to feel today? Not, what do I need to achieve? When she becomes your companion, not your shadow, your life becomes poetry again. A woman rooted in this kind of inner wholeness is not afraid to pause. She is not afraid to say, I don't know yet, or I need rest, or that doesn't feel right for me. Her softness is not a performance. It's her alignment. Her clarity does not come from controlling every variable, but from trusting her inner rhythm. She no longer needs to be everything to everyone. She has become everything to herself. And what begins to bloom in this space is something almost unnameable. A radiance that doesn't try, a presence that doesn't push, a beauty that doesn't ask. It's not the kind you find in mirrors. It's the kind you feel in the presence of someone fully alive, someone who has met her past without shame and now wears her truth like sunlight on her skin. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, but this becoming is not loud. It is not rushed. It is slow, sacred, and often quiet. It happens in the space between the roles you play and the essence you are. And only when you welcome every part, even the ones once pushed aside, can you finally say, I have returned to myself." Let that be your legacy. Not the image others remember, but the feeling they had in your presence. Let your children, your friends, your younger self say, she lived with her whole heart. Let your days be marked, not just by what you did, but by how fully you allowed yourself to feel, to laugh, to fall, to rise again. The woman who has embraced her inner child carries a confidence deeper than posture, louder than words. It is a knowing, a rootedness. She does not fear the dark because she has walked through it. She does not chase love because she has become it. She does not ask for permission to exist because she knows she always belonged. If today feels heavy, if the ache is still there, remember this: you are not behind. You are not broken. You are returning. And every step you take toward your own soul is a miracle. The child inside you does not ask for perfection. She asks for your presence. And once you offer that, she will give you back the one thing the world could never touch: your original light. So, take 5 minutes. Close your eyes. Picture you at 5, at 7. Sitting under a tree, waiting. What does she need today? Don't rush. Just listen. Maybe she'll smile. Maybe she'll cry. But whatever rises, it's real. And that realness is your compass now. You are not just becoming confident. You are becoming whole. You are not just healing your past. You are honoring your soul. And as that inner child begins to live through you again, your life will change. Not by force, but by grace. Because when she smiles, you know you've found your way home.